The fluorescent lights of Lee High School flickered as Emily Sanders closed her locker, with a metallic clang that echoed through the emptying hallway. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the parking lot where yellow buses were lined up like patient sentinels. She adjusted the straps of her backpack and checked her phone. 3:47 p.m. Her mom would be expecting her home by 5. You coming to the game Friday?" Jessica Chen appeared at her side, her voice bouncing with enthusiasm that seemed out of place in the dreary October afternoon. Emily forced a smile. "I don't think so. Got a lot of homework." Jessica's expression shifted to concern. "You've been saying that for weeks now. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, totally fine." Emily's voice came out too quickly, too bright. She started walking toward the exit, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. "Just trying to keep my grades up for college apps." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her grades had slipped from straight A's to B's and C's since September, and her guidance counselor had pulled her aside twice to ask if everything was all right at home. But Emily couldn't explain what was really happening, how the walls of her own house felt like they were closing in, how every argument between her parents made her stomach twist into knots, or how she'd started spending more time away from home just to breathe. Huntsville stretched before her as she pushed through the school's main doors, the rain immediately soaking through her light jacket. The city sat nestled in the Tennessee Valley, surrounded by mountains that now disappeared into gray mist. Founded as a cotton town, Huntsville had transformed into Rocket City during the space race, and even now, the influence of aerospace engineering shaped everything from the economy to the educated transient population that moved in and out with government contracts. Emily walked quickly toward the bus stop on University Drive, passing the strip malls and chain restaurants that defined this part of town. The rain intensified, and she regretted not accepting Jessica's offer for a ride. But Jessica asked too many questions lately, and Emily didn't have answers she could share. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Dad and I need to talk to you tonight, important." Emily's heart sank. She knew what that meant. For months she'd heard them arguing late at night. Her father's job at the Redstone Arsenal was being eliminated. Her mother's medical bills from the car accident last year were still unpaid, and the house they'd bought during better times was now drowning them in debt. Emily had overheard enough hushed conversations to know they were considering selling the house, maybe even moving out of state. She reached the bus stop and huddled under the small shelter, watching cars spray water as they passed. A dark sedan slowed down near her and the passenger window rolled down. Emily tensed. "Need a ride?" The driver was older, maybe mid-30s, with a kind face and graying temples. "This weather's terrible." "I'm good, thanks," Emily said, taking a step back. "I'm headed toward Hampton Cove if that helps. Your parents wouldn't want you walking in this storm." Something about the way he mentioned her parents made Emily pause. "Do I know you? I've seen you around. Work with your dad at the Arsenal." He smiled, and it seemed genuine. "David Merchant. I'm in the engineering division." Emily relaxed slightly. Her father had mentioned co-workers' names over dinner, though she couldn't recall if David was one of them. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and her jeans were already soaked through. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. Hampton Cove would actually be perfect, she said, making a decision. "My friend lives there. I can walk from the entrance." She climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the warmth. The car smelled like coffee and leather, clean but lived in. A child's car seat sat in the back, which made her feel safer somehow. "Terrible day for walking," David said, pulling back onto University Drive. "I remember being in high school. Used to walk everywhere, no matter the weather." Emily nodded, watching the familiar landmarks pass by. The Target where she'd bought school supplies in August. The Starbucks where she studied with friends. The bank her parents used. Normal, everyday places that anchored her to this life she was increasingly desperate to escape. "Your dad mentioned you're looking at colleges," David said conversationally. "Yeah, maybe Auburn or UAB." Emily kept her answers short, polite but not too engaging. They turned onto County Line Road, heading toward the more affluent Hampton Cove area where massive houses sat on large lots, separated by pine forests. The rain made visibility poor, and David drove carefully, his wipers working overtime. "Must be stressful senior year," he continued. "Applications, tests, figuring out your future. It's a lot," Emily admitted. "More than you know," she thought. "More than anyone knows." The truth was that Emily had been thinking about her future constantly, but not in the way her parents or teachers imagined. She'd been researching emancipation laws, looking at job postings in other cities, calculating how much money she'd need to save to rent a room somewhere far from here. The idea of another year living in that house, watching her parents' marriage crumble while pretending everything was fine, felt unbearable. "This is good," Emily said as they approached the Hampton Cove entrance. "You can drop me here." But David drove past the turn. "Sorry, the next street," Emily said, her voice rising slightly. "Actually, I wanted to show you something first," David said, and his tone had changed, still friendly but with an edge of authority. "It'll just take a minute." Emily's hand moved to the door handle. "I really need to get out here." "Emily, listen to me carefully." David's voice was firm now, almost paternal. "I know things are difficult at home. I know you've been looking for a way out. I can help you." Cold fear washed over her. "Stop the car. Now. Your parents are going to lose the house. Your father's losing his job. Your mother can barely afford her medications. You heard them fighting last night about whether they could afford to keep you in school, or if you'd need to start working full-time. How did he know these things? Had he really worked with her father? Or was that a lie?" Emily's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. "And I'm giving you a choice," David continued, turning onto a side road that led into dense woods. "You can go back to that life, the fighting, the financial stress, watching everything fall apart, or you can start fresh. New identity, new life, away from all of this." "This is kidnapping," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Let me out or I'll scream. There's no one around to hear you. And I'm not kidnapping you, I'm offering you freedom." He pulled the car to a stop in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. "Think about it, Emily. No more pressure, no more pretending. You can be whoever you want to be." Emily lunged for the door, but it was locked with child safety locks. She fumbled with her phone, but David was faster, snatching it from her hands. "I've helped other girls like you," he said calmly, pocketing her phone. "Girls who needed to escape. I provide new documents, a place to stay, a fresh start. But you have to choose this. I'm not forcing you." "Yes, you are," Emily shouted, tears streaming down her face. "This is force. Taking someone against their will is force." David sighed as if disappointed. "You're young. You don't understand yet. Sometimes the best decisions feel scary at first. In a few months, you'll thank me." He started the car again, driving deeper into the wooded area. Emily's mind spun with terror and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. This was Huntsville, Alabama, a city of engineers and scientists, of normal suburban families and safe neighborhoods. Things like this didn't happen here, but they did, and they were happening to her. Back at Lee High School, Emily's backpack sat abandoned under the bus stop shelter, slowly soaking in the rain. Inside were her algebra textbook, her English essay on The Great Gatsby, and a permission slip for a college visit that her mother had signed that morning. The school bus drove past without stopping, its driver assuming Emily had gotten a ride home. At the Sanders house on Weatherly Road, Carol Sanders stirred a pot of chili, glancing at the clock. 4:15 p.m. Emily would be home soon, and then they'd have to have the difficult conversation about downsizing, maybe moving to a smaller apartment across town. Carol dreaded it, but Richard insisted they needed to be honest with their daughter about their financial situation. Richard Sanders sat in his home office, staring at the severance package documents from Redstone Arsenal. 30 years of service, reduced to a manila envelope and 2 months' pay. He'd already updated his resume and started applying to positions at other defense contractors, but the market was tight, and he wasn't getting younger. The house felt like an anchor dragging them under. Neither parent knew that their daughter was already miles away, heading south on Highway 231, her life as Emily Sanders effectively over. David Merchant drove with calm confidence, occasionally glancing at the terrified girl in the passenger seat. "Your parents will report you missing," he said matter-of-factly. "Police will search for a few months, maybe a year. Then the case will go cold. It always does. And you'll be living under a new name, in a new place, with people who care about you." Emily said nothing, her mind numb with shock and fear. She stared out the window at the passing landscape, memorizing details she hoped would help her escape. Road signs, landmarks, anything that might later help someone find her. But the rain obscured everything, turning the world into a watercolor of grays and greens. At 5:00 p.m., Carol Sanders called her daughter's cell phone. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. She wasn't worried yet. Emily sometimes stayed after school to work on projects or chat with friends. She'd call again in 15 minutes. By 5:30 p.m., Carol had called 4 times. Now worry crept in. She texted, "Where are you? Call me." At 6 p.m., Richard joined his wife in calling Emily's friends. Jessica Chen said she'd last seen Emily at 3:45, heading toward the bus stop. No, she didn't seem upset. No, she didn't mention any plans. At 7 p.m., the Sanders drove to Lee High School. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars belonging to teachers working late. They found Emily's backpack under the bus stop shelter, soaked and heavy with rain. At 7:30 p.m., they called the Huntsville Police Department to report their daughter missing. By 8 p.m., officers were canvassing the area around the school, interviewing the few people still around. No one had seen anything unusual. A girl waiting for a bus in the rain, then gone. The investigation would officially begin the next morning, but the critical first hours were already lost. Emily Sanders had vanished into the gray October rain, leaving behind only questions and a family that would never be whole again. Detective Sarah Reeves had worked for the Huntsville Police Department for 12 years, and missing teenager cases always hit her the hardest. She sat across from Carol and Richard Sanders in their living room on Weatherly Road, watching them cling to each other on a floral-patterned couch that had clearly been purchased during happier times. The house showed signs of a family struggling. Discount store groceries piled on the kitchen counter, unopened bills stacked on the coffee table, and a general air of barely maintained order. "Walk me through Emily's typical routine," Sarah said, her pen poised over her notepad. It was 9:30 p.m. on October 14th, and they were already losing precious time. Richard cleared his throat, his voice rough. "She takes the bus to school at 7:15. Classes end at 3:30. She usually gets home between 4:30 and 5 depending on whether she stays after for clubs or the library." "Any clubs or activities today?" "Not that we know of," Carol said, twisting a tissue in her hands. "We called her friends. Jessica Chen saw her leaving school around 3:45, walking toward the bus stop on University Drive." Sarah made notes. "Did Emily have any problems at school? Bullying? Conflicts with other students? Issues with teachers?" The parents exchanged glances. "Her grades dropped this semester," Richard admitted, "from A's to B's and C's. We thought it was just stress about college applications. Any changes in behavior? New friends? Secretive phone calls? Spending more time away from home?" Carol nodded slowly. "She's been quieter lately, spending more time in her room. But we thought," her voice broke, "we thought it was normal teenage stuff. God, we should have paid more attention." "You couldn't have known," Sarah said gently, though she'd learned that parents almost always found ways to blame themselves. "Did Emily have a boyfriend? Any romantic interests you were aware of?" "No," Richard said firmly. "She dated a boy from her chemistry class last year, but that ended months ago. Nothing serious." "What about online activity? Social media? Dating apps? Gaming platforms?" "She has Instagram and Snapchat," Carol said. "We have her passwords. Can you check them? We'll need her laptop and access to her accounts. With your permission, we'll also pull her phone records." Sarah paused, knowing the next questions would be difficult. "I need to ask, was there any tension at home? Arguments? Conflicts? Anything that might have made Emily want to leave?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Richard spoke. "We've been having financial problems. I'm losing my job at the Arsenal. We've been arguing about money, about possibly selling the house. Emily overheard some of it, but she wouldn't run away over that, would she?" Sarah had seen teenagers run away for less, but she kept that thought to herself. "We're going to treat this as a critical missing person case. I need recent photos of Emily, a list of all her friends and their contact information, the names of teachers she was close to, and any places she liked to go." By 11:00 p.m., the investigation was in full swing. Officers had canvassed the area around Lee High School and the bus stop, finding nothing beyond Emily's abandoned backpack. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed her walking toward the bus stop at 3:52 p.m., but the angle didn't capture what happened next. The rain and poor visibility made identifying vehicles difficult. Sarah stood in Emily's bedroom, taking in the space that told the story of a girl caught between childhood and adulthood. Posters of indie bands competed for wall space with college pennants from Auburn and UAB. A desk held a closed laptop, textbooks stacked neatly, and a mason jar filled with pens and highlighters. The bed was made, stuffed animals arranged on the pillows alongside fashion magazines. But it was the wall calendar that caught Sarah's attention. Emily had marked the days with different colored pens: red for tests, blue for assignments due, green for fun activities. October 14th was blank, just another Friday. But future dates showed a college visit to Auburn on October 28th, a friend's birthday party on November 5th, and Thanksgiving break, written in large letters with a smiley face on November 24th. These were the plans of a girl looking forward to her future, not someone planning to disappear. Sarah opened Emily's laptop, entering the password Carol had provided. The browser history showed typical teenage activity: YouTube videos, social media scrolling, college admission websites. But there was also something concerning: multiple searches about emancipation laws in Alabama, questions about how much it cost to rent an apartment, and inquiries about getting a GED instead of finishing high school. She was researching leaving, Sarah muttered to herself, but researching wasn't the same as doing, and even troubled teenagers didn't usually vanish without taking clothes, money, or personal items. 300 miles south, Emily Sanders sat on a twin bed in a small windowless room that smelled of mildew and stale air. The house was somewhere in rural Mississippi. She'd seen signs for Meridian during the drive, but David had taken back roads for the final hour, deliberately confusing her sense of direction. "This is temporary," David had said when he'd locked her in, "just until you adjust to the situation. Then you'll have more freedom." Emily had screamed until her throat was raw, pounded on the door until her fists ached, and searched every inch of the small room for any means of escape. The door was solid wood with a deadbolt on the outside. The walls were cinder block, painted a dingy beige. A single bare bulb provided harsh overhead lighting. Besides the bed, there was a small dresser and a bucket in the corner that made her stomach turn when she realized its purpose. She had no sense of time. Her phone was gone, and there were no windows to gauge whether it was still night or if morning had come. She tried to reconstruct what had happened, searching for any detail that might help her escape or that might help police find her, if they were even looking yet. David Merchant, mid-30s, graying hair, kind face that hid monstrous intentions. He'd claimed to work with her father at Redstone Arsenal, but was that true? Had he targeted her specifically, or was she just an opportunity that presented itself? And what had he meant when he said he'd helped other girls like her? The thought made Emily's blood run cold. Were there other girls? Where were they now? Were they alive? A key turned in the lock and Emily scrambled to her feet, backing against the far wall. David entered carrying a paper bag and a bottle of water. "I brought you dinner," he said, setting them on the dresser. "Turkey sandwich, chips, apple. You need to eat." "I need to go home," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My parents will be looking for me. The police will find you." "Your parents reported you missing at 7:30 last night," David said calmly, checking his watch. "It's now 2 p.m. on Saturday. The police have questioned your friends, searched your school, and are probably going through your room right now. They'll find your search history about emancipation and running away, and they'll assume you left voluntarily." Emily felt her hope deflate. He was right. She had left a digital trail that would make her look like a runaway. "Even so," she said, "they'll keep looking. Someone will have seen your car, security cameras will have footage. My car is registered to a fake identity. I have 4 different sets of license plates, and we took back roads specifically to avoid highway cameras." David pulled a chair from beside the dresser and sat down, infuriatingly casual. "I've done this before, Emily. I know how to stay invisible." "Other girls," Emily whispered. "You said you helped other girls. Where are they? Living their new lives. Happy, or at least happier than they were before." He leaned forward. "I'm not a monster, Emily. I see girls trapped in bad situations and I give them a way out. Eventually you'll understand. This isn't helping, this is kidnapping. My situation at home wasn't perfect, but I have parents who love me, friends who care about me, a future I was working toward." Tears streamed down her face. "Please, please just take me back. I won't tell anyone. I'll say I ran away and came back on my own." David shook his head. "It's too late for that. The moment I drove away from that bus stop, both of our paths were set. But I promise you, Emily, if you cooperate and embrace your new life, things will get better. You'll have a new identity, a safe place to live, and eventually, the freedom to build whatever life you want." "Under your control," Emily spat. "Under my protection," David corrected. "The world is dangerous for young women on their own. I'm offering you structure, safety, and opportunity." He stood up and walked to the door. "Eat your food, get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start discussing your new identity and the rules of your new life. The more you cooperate, the easier this will be." The door closed and locked behind him. Emily collapsed onto the bed, her mind reeling. She thought about her parents, imagining their panic and desperation. She thought about Jessica and her other friends, probably being questioned by police right now. She thought about the college visits she'd planned, the future she'd been building, all of it ripped away in a single afternoon. But she also thought about survival. If David had done this before and gotten away with it, he was smart and careful. Screaming and fighting hadn't worked. Maybe she needed a different approach. Earn his trust, look for opportunities, and wait for the right moment to escape. Emily forced herself to eat the sandwich, knowing she'd need her strength. She studied every detail of the room, looking for weaknesses she'd missed before. And she began planning, because if she'd learned anything from the true crime documentaries she secretly watched late at night, it was that victims who fought smartly had better chances than victims who fought blindly. Back in Huntsville, the investigation expanded rapidly. By Saturday afternoon, Emily's disappearance was all over local news. Her school photo, a smiling girl with long brown hair and hazel eyes, appeared on television screens and social media feeds across northern Alabama. The Amber Alert system had been activated, sending her description to millions of phones. Detective Reeves coordinated with the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit, knowing that time was critical. Statistics showed that if an abducted child wasn't found within the first 48 hours, the chances of finding them alive dropped dramatically. "Tell me about Emily's personality," Sarah asked Jessica Chen, who sat in an interview room with her parents present. "Was she impulsive? Would she go somewhere with a stranger?" Jessica shook her head emphatically. Emily was careful, maybe too careful sometimes. She always texted to let people know where she was, and she never got into cars with people she didn't know. Her mom drilled that into her after the Amanda Berry case was all over the news. Did she mention anyone new in her life? Someone from work? Someone she met online? She doesn't even have a job, and she barely used social media anymore. Jessica's voice cracked. Something was bothering her lately, but she wouldn't talk about it. I asked her multiple times, and she always said she was fine. Sarah made notes. The pattern emerging was of a troubled but cautious teenager who had been researching escape options but hadn't taken any concrete steps. The scenario of voluntary running away was becoming less likely by the hour. The bus stop security footage was enhanced, revealing a dark sedan slowing down near Emily around 3:55 p.m. The rain and angle made the license plate impossible to read, but tech specialists identified it as likely a Honda Accord, 2008-2012 model year, dark blue or black. That narrowed it down to approximately 2,400 vehicles registered in Madison County alone. Richard Sanders sat in his home office, transformed into a command center for finding his daughter. Volunteers from their church had organized search parties, combing through wooded areas and abandoned buildings around Huntsville. Carol had taken over social media, posting Emily's photo on every platform she could find, joining missing persons groups, and reaching out to anyone who might help. Their house was filled with friends and family. Richard's brother had driven up from Birmingham. Carol's sister had flown in from Nashville, and neighbors brought food that no one had appetite to eat. The casserole dishes piled up in the kitchen, acts of kindness that felt hollow when their daughter was missing. "We should have seen the signs," Richard said to his brother Tom, staring at the wall map where pins marked all the places search parties had covered. She was researching how to leave. She was crying out for help, and we were too wrapped up in our own problems to notice. "You didn't know," Tom said. "You're good parents. Emily knows you love her." "Does she?" Richard's voice broke. "We've been fighting constantly about money, about the house, about everything. What must she have thought, listening to us tear each other apart?" The guilt was consuming him. Every parenting mistake, every harsh word, every time he'd been too tired or stressed to really listen to his daughter, it all played on repeat in his mind. If they got Emily back, when they got Emily back, he corrected himself, everything would be different. Detective Reeves's phone rang at 6:00 p.m. on Saturday. A witness had come forward. A clerk at the gas station near the bus stop remembered seeing a dark sedan around 4 p.m. on Friday. The driver had come in to buy coffee and use the bathroom. Security footage showed a white male, mid-30s, wearing a rain jacket and jeans. The image quality was poor, but it was better than nothing. "Run it through facial recognition," Sarah ordered. "Cross-reference with anyone who has access to Redstone Arsenal or connections to the Sanders family, and get this photo to every news outlet. Somebody knows this man." As darkness fell on the second night of Emily's disappearance, the mood in the Sanders house shifted from desperate hope to creeping dread. 48 hours had passed. The critical window was closing, and Emily Sanders remained missing, her fate unknown to everyone who loved her. 3 weeks had passed since Emily Sanders disappeared from a rainy bus stop in Huntsville, and the investigation had hit a devastating wall. Detective Sarah Reeves stood in the conference room at the Huntsville Police Department, surrounded by case files, maps marked with search areas, and a whiteboard covered in theories that led nowhere. The gas station security photo of the potential suspect had been broadcast across Alabama and neighboring states, generating hundreds of tips. Each one had been investigated. Each one had led to nothing. The man in the grainy footage remained unidentified, as if he'd materialized from thin air specifically to take Emily Sanders, and then vanished back into nothingness. "We've checked every registered Honda Accord within a 100-mile radius," Officer Mike Torres said, exhaustion evident in his voice. "Interviewed owners, examined vehicles for evidence. Nothing matches." Sarah nodded grimly. She'd suspected from the beginning that the vehicle was either stolen, using fake plates, or registered under a false identity. Whoever took Emily was careful, methodical, and experienced. The complete absence of physical evidence, no fibers, no DNA, no witnesses beyond the blurry gas station footage, suggested someone who understood police procedure and knew how to avoid detection. "What about the angle that Emily ran away voluntarily?" FBI agent Marcus Chen asked. He'd been assigned to the case after the first 48 hours, bringing federal resources but also federal skepticism. "Her search history supports that theory," Sarah admitted. "She was researching emancipation, apartment rentals, GED requirements, but everything else contradicts it. She left without money, without clothes, without her laptop or phone charger. She had a college visit scheduled for 2 weeks after she disappeared. Her best friend says she was secretive but not suicidal or reckless. Teenagers can be impulsive," Marcus countered. "Maybe she accepted a ride from someone, thought she was escaping her problems, and things went wrong." "Then where is she?" Sarah's frustration boiled over. "It's been 3 weeks. If she ran away, she'd need food, shelter, money. She'd need to surface somewhere. But there's been no activity on her social media. No attempts to contact friends, no use of her debit card, nothing. She's either being held against her will or she didn't finish the sentence. The alternative was too grim." In a small house outside Meridian, Mississippi, Emily Sanders, now called Sarah according to the documents David had given her, sat at a kitchen table eating breakfast. The house was isolated, surrounded by pine forests and accessed by a long dirt road that prevented any casual visitors. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. David sat across from her, reading a newspaper and occasionally glancing up to ensure she was eating. The past 3 weeks had been a psychological warfare that left Emily exhausted and uncertain of everything except her desperate need to survive. The first week had been the worst. Locked in that windowless room, her only human contact being David bringing meals and attempting conversations about her new life. She'd refused to eat, refused to speak, spent hours crying and planning escape attempts that seemed increasingly futile. But David had been patient, almost disturbingly so. He never raised his voice, never physically harmed her, but his control was absolute. He explained that the room was soundproof, the house was miles from anyone who could help, and he had friends in law enforcement who would alert him if she tried to contact authorities. "I'm not your enemy, Sarah," he'd said during one of those early conversations, using her new name with casual familiarity. "I know you're angry and scared, but that will pass. The girls I've helped before went through the same adjustment period. Now they're grateful." Emily had spat in his face. He'd simply wiped it off and left the room. By the second week, hunger and isolation had begun breaking down her resistance. David had started leaving the door unlocked during the day, allowing her to move around the house under his supervision. She'd considered attacking him, but he was bigger, stronger, and always careful to maintain distance. The few times she'd tried to run, he'd easily caught her and locked her back in the room for 24 hours. "Trust is earned," he'd said after the last attempt. "Show me you can be trusted, and you'll have more freedom." Now in week 3, Emily was engaged in a desperate gambit, pretending to adapt to accept her situation, while constantly watching for opportunities. She'd learned that David left the house every Wednesday afternoon for exactly 2 hours, though he locked her in the bedroom during these absences. She'd learned that he kept his phone and keys in his jacket pocket, which he hung by the front door. She'd learned that he was paranoid about phone calls and never let her hear his conversations with whoever he spoke to late at night. "You're being very cooperative lately," David observed, setting down his newspaper. "I'm pleased with your progress." Emily forced herself to meet his eyes, to show neither defiance nor complete submission. Just tired acceptance. I don't have much choice, do I? You always have choices. You're choosing to adapt rather than fight. That's wise. He took a sip of coffee. I think you're ready for the next step. I have a friend who can provide you with a more complete identity. Social security number, birth certificate, school records. But it costs money, and I need your cooperation. Emily's stomach twisted. What kind of cooperation? Nothing you need to fear. I'm not a monster, despite what you think. David's voice carried an edge of offense, as if her fear was somehow insulting. But we need to establish our story. If anyone asks, you're my niece. Your mother, my sister, died in a car accident, and I took you in. You were homeschooled, which explains the lack of recent school records. Can you remember that? Your niece named Sarah, Emily said flatly. Exactly. We'll practice our story until it's natural. Eventually, you'll enroll in community college, maybe get a part-time job. You'll build a real life just under a different name. A different name, a different identity, a different life, all designed to erase Emily Sanders from existence. She thought about her parents, wondered if they were still searching or if they'd started to accept that she was gone. The thought of them grieving, of her mother crying herself to sleep, of her father blaming himself, made her want to scream. But she kept her expression neutral. Okay. David raised an eyebrow. I'll cooperate. I'll be Sarah. I'll learn the story. Emily's voice was steady, though inside she was screaming. But I want something in return. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. I want to go outside. Real outside, not just the backyard. I want to see people, go to a store, something. I'm going crazy locked in this house. David considered this. If you prove you can be trusted over the next few weeks, we'll discuss it. But any attempt to signal for help, any suspicious behavior, and you'll lose all privileges. Understood? Understood. Back in Huntsville, the Sanders family home had become a shrine to loss. Emily's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it. The made bed, the wall calendar still showing October, the desk with homework that would never be turned in. Carol spent hours in there, talking to her absent daughter as if she could hear, promising that they'd never given up hope. Richard had thrown himself into the search with manic energy, organizing volunteer groups, maintaining a Facebook page called Find Emily Sanders that had garnered 50,000 followers, and pestering Detective Reeves daily for updates. The financial problems that had seemed so overwhelming in October now felt trivial. What did money matter when your child was gone? The marriage, paradoxically, had strengthened under shared grief. Carol and Richard clung to each other in a way they hadn't in years, united by the singular purpose of finding their daughter. They attended support groups for families of missing children, where they met other parents trapped in the same nightmare of not knowing. The not knowing is the worst part, a mother named Patricia said during one meeting. Her son had vanished 4 years earlier. You can't grieve because they might be alive. You can't move forward because they might come home tomorrow. You're just stuck in this limbo forever. Carol and Richard exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. They would never accept that fate. They would search until they found answers, no matter how long it took. Jessica Chen had started a campaign at Lee High School, keeping Emily's story alive through social media posts, fundraisers for the search effort, and memorial events. She wore a bracelet with Emily's name and date of disappearance, a constant reminder that her friend was out there somewhere waiting to be found. But as November turned to December and December turned to January, the leads dried up. The tips stopped coming. The news crews moved on to other stories. The volunteers stopped showing up for search parties. The world, it seemed, was ready to forget Emily Sanders. Detective Reeves refused to let the case go cold. She reviewed the evidence obsessively, looking for anything she'd missed. The gas station photo, the Honda Accord, the timing of the disappearance. There had to be something that would crack this case open. Late one night in January 2012, Sarah was looking through databases of similar cases, searching for patterns. Teenage girls who disappeared under similar circumstances, last seen in public places, no evidence of struggle, vehicles matching the description, cases that went unsolved. She found 12 cases across 5 southeastern states over the past decade, all girls between 15 and 18, all disappeared without a trace. All investigations that had stalled for lack of evidence. It couldn't be coincidence. Sarah called Marcus Chen, despite the late hour. I think we're looking at a serial abductor, someone who's been doing this for years. Based on what evidence? Pattern recognition. Similar victim profiles, similar circumstances, Similar lack of forensic evidence. This person knows what they're doing because they've done it before. Or you're seeing patterns where none exist because you want to solve this case, Marcus said, though his tone wasn't dismissive. But send me the case files. I'll review them. Sarah hung up and stared at the photos of the 12 girls, including Emily's school picture. 12 families devastated. 12 lives stolen. 12 cases collecting dust in police archives. She made a silent promise to all of them, especially to Emily Sanders, that she wouldn't stop looking. Somewhere out there, someone knew what happened to these girls, and eventually they would make a mistake. Spring arrived in Mississippi with oppressive humidity and blooming dogwoods. Emily, Sarah now, even in her own thoughts, because the constant repetition had begun eroding her sense of self, had been allowed increasingly more freedom. She'd been to the grocery store 3 times, always under David's watchful supervision. She'd met 2 of his friends, though she suspected they were fellow predators or enablers, people who shared his twisted worldview. One was a woman named Margaret, probably in her 60s, who ran a document forging operation from her home. She'd taken Sarah's photo, measured her height and weight, and asked questions about her birth date and birthplace for the fake documents. She treated the whole thing like a normal business transaction, as if creating false identities for kidnapped teenagers was just another service industry. The other was a man named Robert, younger than David, maybe late 20s, who'd looked at Sarah with undisguised interest that made her skin crawl. David had noticed and cut the visit short, which had been both relieving and terrifying. Was David protective of her, or was it possessive jealousy? The psychological manipulation was insidious. David never raised his voice, never struck her, but maintained total control through a system of rewards and punishments. Good behavior meant television privileges, better food, time outside. Any perceived defiance meant isolation, bland meals, and lectures about throwing away opportunities. He also talked constantly about how much worse her life would be if she escaped. She'd be arrested for using false documents. Her parents would be disappointed in her for running away. She'd damaged her future by missing school. The lies were so frequent and so confidently delivered that sometimes in her darkest moments, Emily almost believed them. But then she'd remember, really remember, that afternoon at the bus stop, the terror of being driven away, the reality that she was a victim, not a volunteer. Those memories kept her anchored to the truth, even as David tried to rewrite her history. One evening in May, David made an announcement that changed everything. "I'm getting married," he said over dinner, his tone almost cheerful. "Her name is Linda. She's a widow with a son, and she's been looking for stability. We've been seeing each other for a few months." Emily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "You're getting married?" "Next month. She'll be moving in here with her son, Tyler. He's 6 years old. And Sarah," he looked at her meaningfully, "you're going to be the helpful older cousin who lives with us. Can you do that?" 1,000 thoughts raced through Emily's mind. Another person in the house meant more witnesses, but also more complexity. A 6-year-old child meant someone innocent being brought into this nightmare. A wife meant David would be distracted, might make mistakes. "Does Linda know?" Emily asked carefully. "About me? About what you did?" "Linda knows you're my niece whose mother died, and that you've been living with me. That's all she needs to know." David's expression hardened. "And that's all you'll ever tell her? If you say one word to suggest otherwise, I'll make sure you never see daylight again. And Linda and Tyler will suffer too, do you understand?" Emily understood perfectly. He was threatening not just her, but innocent people. She nodded slowly. "Good. Linda's a good woman who's had a hard life. Tyler deserves a stable home. We're going to be a normal family, and you're going to help make that happen. A normal family built on lies, imprisonment, and psychological torture." Emily wanted to laugh hysterically at the absurdity, but she'd learned to show no emotional reaction that David might interpret as defiance. That night, locked in her room, David still didn't trust her enough for unrestricted freedom. Emily made a decision. When Linda and Tyler moved in, she'd find a way to get help. A 6-year-old couldn't keep secrets well. A new wife would eventually notice inconsistencies. There would be moments when David couldn't watch her every second. She'd been in captivity for 7 months. She'd survived this long. She could survive longer if it meant eventually escaping and exposing David for what he was. Her parents' faces flickered in her memory. Older now in her imagination, worn down by grief and searching, she wondered if they'd kept her room the same, if they still looked for her, if they'd given up hope. "I'm still here," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm still fighting. Please don't give up on me." but her words disappeared into the silence of the Mississippi night, unheard by anyone who could help. June 2012 marked 8 months since Emily Sanders disappeared from Huntsville, and the beginning of what would become her new reality. Linda Pearson arrived at David's isolated Mississippi home with her 6-year-old son Tyler, a U-Haul truck full of furniture, and dreams of a fresh start after her husband's death from cancer 2 years earlier. Emily watched from the living room window as David helped Linda unload boxes, playing the role of devoted fiancé with disturbing authenticity. Tyler, a small boy with sandy hair and cautious eyes, clung to his mother's leg, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings. "Sarah, come help us," David called, his tone friendly but with an underlying command that Emily had learned to recognize. She stepped outside into the humid June heat, forcing a smile as Linda approached. The woman was in her early 40s, tired-looking but kind-faced, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. Everything about her seemed genuine, which made the situation even more grotesque. "You must be Sarah," Linda said warmly, extending her hand. "David's told me so much about you. I'm so sorry about your mother." Emily shook her hand, the lies tasting like poison in her mouth. "Thank you. I'm glad David found someone. He's been lonely." The words came automatically now, part of the script David had drilled into her over weeks of practice. She was Sarah Merchant, his niece, orphaned and grateful for his care. She was homeschooled due to anxiety issues after her mother's death. She was shy but helpful, quiet but not troubled. Tyler peeked out from behind his mother and Emily crouched down to his level. "Hi, Tyler. I'm Sarah, your new cousin. Do you like dinosaurs?" Tyler asked, his voice small. "I love dinosaurs," Emily lied, though her heart ached looking at this innocent child being brought into David's web of deception. "Maybe you can show me your favorite ones later." Tyler's face brightened and Linda's expression softened with relief. "See, sweetie, I told you this would be a good home." Over the following weeks, a grotesque parody of family life established itself. David and Linda married in a small civil ceremony, with Emily serving as witness and Tyler as ring bearer. They celebrated with cake from a local grocery store, and David kissed his new wife with what seemed like genuine affection, which disturbed Emily more than anger would have. Could a man who kidnapped teenagers also be capable of love? Or was Linda just another victim, manipulated differently but equally trapped? Emily's role became that of built-in babysitter and household helper. She watched Tyler while Linda worked her nursing shift at the local hospital, cooked meals under Linda's appreciative guidance, and maintained the fiction that she was a traumatized but recovering teenager finding stability with family. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd researched running away to escape family dysfunction, and now she was trapped in a fake family that looked functional from the outside, but was fundamentally poisoned. "You're good with Tyler," Linda observed one afternoon as they folded laundry together. "Have you thought about what you want to do with your future?" David mentioned maybe community college. Emily carefully measured her response. Any mention of her real aspirations, Auburn University, engineering degree, life in Huntsville, would raise questions. "I haven't decided yet. Maybe nursing like you. It's rewarding work. Hard, but rewarding." Linda paused, then added gently, "I know losing your mother must have been devastating. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." The kindness was almost unbearable. Emily wanted to scream the truth, that her mother wasn't dead, that she was probably still searching, that this entire life was built on kidnapping and lies. But David's threats echoed in her mind. If she told Linda, he'd disappear with her and Linda and Tyler would be left with trauma and police investigations. Or worse, David might hurt them. So Emily just nodded. "Thank you. That means a lot." In Huntsville, the 1-year anniversary of Emily's disappearance approached with excruciating slowness. Detective Sarah Reeves had continued investigating despite pressure to shift resources to newer cases. The wall in her office was covered with information about the 12 similar disappearances she'd identified, trying to find connections that might lead to answers. Carol and Richard Sanders had aged visibly in the past year. Carol's hair had gone gray, and Richard had developed a persistent tremor in his hands from stress. Their marriage, which had strengthened initially through shared grief, now showed cracks from the sustained weight of uncertainty. "We should accept that she might be gone," Richard said one night, the words clearly painful to speak. "Not stop searching, but acknowledge the possibility." "No." Carol's response was immediate and fierce. "She's alive, I know it. A mother knows. Carol, it's been a year. No evidence, no sightings, nothing. The police have checked thousands of leads. The FBI says the statistical probability. I don't care about statistics. Carol's voice rose. She's our daughter. She's out there somewhere and she's waiting for us to find her. Richard pulled his wife into his arms, both of them crying. The house that had once held arguments about money now only held grief. They'd sold the house months ago, moved into a smaller apartment, used the proceeds to fund the search efforts and hire private investigators. Nothing had worked. Detective Reeves attended the one-year vigil they held at Lee High School, watching hundreds of community members light candles for Emily. Jessica Chen spoke, now a senior herself, about her missing friend. Emily was careful and smart, Jessica said, her voice amplified by microphone. She didn't run away. Someone took her, and that person is still out there. Please, if anyone knows anything, come forward. Help bring Emily home. Sarah scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who seemed too interested, too emotional, or too detached. Serial criminals sometimes attended vigils for their victims, feeding on the attention and grief, but she saw only genuine sadness and community solidarity. After the vigil, Sarah approached the Sanders. I haven't given up. I want you to know that. We know, Carol said. You've been our lifeline this year. But Sarah, be honest with us. Do you think she's alive? Sarah chose her words carefully. I think whoever took Emily was experienced and careful. That suggests planning and control, not impulsive violence. Controlled abductors often keep their victims alive, especially if they fit certain psychological needs. So yes, I think there's a reasonable chance Emily is alive somewhere. It was the most hope she could offer, and both parents clung to it. Fall 2012 brought changes to the Merchant household in Mississippi. Tyler started first grade at the local elementary school, requiring daily drop-offs and pickups that pulled Linda away from the house for hours. David had started a new job in construction management, his third identity and fourth job since Emily had known him, leaving early and returning late. These absences gave Emily precious windows of opportunity, but David had prepared for that. The house phone required a password to make outgoing calls. The computer was password protected and monitored. David had installed security cameras inside the house, positioned to watch the doors and windows. Emily's anxiety meant she didn't leave the house alone, and neighbors had been told she was being homeschooled due to psychological issues. The prison had simply expanded and been decorated to look like a home. But Tyler, innocent and trusting, became an unexpected variable. The 6-year-old chattered constantly about his day, his friends, his teacher, Mrs. Patterson. He asked Emily questions about her life, her mother, why she never went anywhere. Why don't you come to my school? Tyler asked one afternoon while they played with his dinosaur collection. You could make friends. I'm being homeschooled, remember? Because I get nervous around lots of people. Why? Children's endless questions had always been adorable in theory. Now they were landmines. Sometimes when sad things happen, like losing someone you love, it makes you scared of other sad things happening. So being around lots of people feels scary. Tyler processed this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. My daddy died. That was sad. But mommy says David is my new daddy, and that's happy. Emily's heart constricted. Do you like David? He's okay. He's not mean, but he's not my real daddy. Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper as if sharing a secret. Sometimes I pretend my real daddy is still alive and will come get us. The parallel wasn't lost on Emily. Both of them living in a reality they hadn't chosen, trying to make the best of circumstances they didn't fully understand. Except Tyler was genuinely adapting to a new family, while Emily was trapped in an elaborate lie. Tyler, can I ask you something? Emily kept her voice casual. Does David ever talk on the phone late at night? Sometimes, in his office with the door closed. Mommy says he's talking to work people. So David still had contacts, still maintained his network. Emily filed this information away, though she had no idea yet how to use it. By spring 2013, Emily had been missing for 18 months. The case remained officially open, but active investigation had essentially ceased. Detective Reeves worked it during her spare time, but new cases demanded attention, and without fresh leads, there was little she could do. The Sanders had become advocates for missing children, channeling their grief into helping other families navigate the nightmare of not knowing. They attended conferences, lobbied for better databases and communication between jurisdictions, and maintained Emily's social media presence to keep her face in the public consciousness. But privately, they were drowning. Carol had started taking antidepressants. Richard had developed high blood pressure and insomnia. Their apartment walls held nothing but photos of Emily, at various ages, smiling and alive, frozen in happier times. "Do you ever wonder if she's happy wherever she is?" Richard asked one night, staring at his daughter's senior photo that would never happen. "If maybe she ran away because she wanted a different life, and she's out there living it." "Don't," Carol said sharply. "Don't rewrite what happened. Someone took our daughter. She didn't leave willingly. But what if she did? What if we were so wrapped up in our problems that we drove her away?" "Richard Sanders, you listen to me." Carol grabbed her husband's face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We were good parents. Not perfect, but good. We loved her, provided for her, supported her dreams. Whatever happened to Emily is not our fault. It's the fault of whoever took her." They held each other and cried as they did most nights, grieving a daughter who might be alive but was lost to them nonetheless. Summer 2014. Emily had been gone for nearly 3 years. In the Mississippi house, the pretense of family had solidified into routine. Tyler, now 8, called David Dad without hesitation. Linda had fully embraced her role as wife and mother, decorating the house with family photos that included Emily, Sarah, as if she'd always been part of their lives. Emily was now 19, though legally she was Sarah Merchant, 18, with forged documents claiming a birthday 6 months later than her real one. She'd taken a GED test under her false identity, passing easily despite the interrupted education. David had even allowed her to enroll in an online community college course, business administration, something generic that wouldn't draw attention. The leash had lengthened considerably, but it was still a leash. She was allowed to drive Linda's car for errands, always with David's knowledge of where and when. She had a prepaid cell phone that David monitored with no contacts except family. She had a part-time job at a local library, arranged through one of David's connections, where she worked under supervision and never formed close friendships. To outsiders, Sarah Merchant was a shy, slightly odd young woman who'd overcome tragedy and was slowly building a life. No one suspected the truth. The psychological damage was accumulating. Emily found herself sometimes responding to Sarah before remembering it wasn't her real name. She'd catch herself thinking of David as her uncle, of Linda as family, before the horror of those thoughts snapped her back to reality. The constant pretending was eroding her sense of self, replacing Emily Sanders with the fiction of Sarah Merchant. She'd stopped crying at night, stopped fantasizing elaborate escape plans, stopped imagining reunion scenes with her parents. The survival mechanism of adaptation had kicked in, and while part of her recognized this as a form of psychological death, another part whispered that it was the only way to endure. One evening, David called her into his office, the room where he made his mysterious late-night calls, where he kept his real documents and identities locked away. "Sarah, I need to discuss something serious with you," he said, and Emily's stomach dropped. Had he discovered she'd been slowly memorizing details about his contacts, noting patterns in his behavior, cataloging information for some future day when she might escape? "I've been thinking about your future," David continued. "You're young. You're doing well in your classes. You're integrated into the family. I think it's time to discuss your long-term situation." "What do you mean?" "I mean that eventually you might want your own life, a relationship, maybe children, and I won't stand in your way as long as you understand the terms." Emily couldn't breathe. "Terms? You can never reveal the truth about how you came to live with us. Your identity is Sarah Merchant, and it always will be. If you want to date someone, I'll meet them first. If you want to marry, they'll never know you're not really my niece. Any children you have will be raised believing our family story." He was offering her a lifetime sentence disguised as freedom, the chance to build a life, but only the life he permitted, only within the lies he'd constructed. "What if I say no?" Emily asked. "What if I want to go back to being Emily Sanders?" David's expression hardened. "Emily Sanders is a missing person who's been gone for 3 years. If she suddenly reappeared, there would be investigations, questions, criminal charges for using false documents. Your parents would face scrutiny for a daughter who ran away, and I would disappear, leaving you to explain everything alone, with no proof of your claims since I'd destroy all evidence. You'd let me go?" Emily asked. "I'd let you try," David replied calmly. "But the life you left no longer exists. Emily Sanders is gone. Accept that, and you'll be happier." Emily wanted to scream that she was still herself, but arguing with David was useless. So she nodded, silently vowing to survive. Soon after, David mentioned Michael, Robert's younger brother. "He's 23, reliable. You two might be compatible." Emily knew what that meant. Another layer of control disguised as freedom. But she agreed to meet him, not for David, but because any new person could be a chance to escape. They met at a barbecue in 2014. Michael had kind eyes and a soft smile. "So you're David's niece?" he asked. "Robert says you're studying business online." "Yeah," she lied easily. Michael talked about his night classes in engineering, and the word hit her like a ghost from her past, her lost dream. Over months, he became part of their lives. Dinners, house projects, laughter, and slowly, they began to date. Michael was good, decent, and that made it worse. He loved Sarah Merchant, unaware she was Emily Sanders, a girl stolen from her real life. By 2015, he proposed. Surrounded by David's approving smile and Linda's tears, she said yes. How could she refuse? The wedding was small, the photos perfect, the foundation built on lies. Their wedding night was gentle but haunted. Michael slept beside a woman still crying for the family she'd lost. Meanwhile, in Huntsville, Detective Sarah Reeves, now retired, still couldn't let go of Emily's case. She'd filled boxes with notes and theories about 12 missing girls. Detective James Morrison inherited her files, promising to continue searching. Emily's parents, Carol and Richard, had turned grief into advocacy through their nonprofit Never Stop Searching, helping other families while barely holding themselves together. Their apartment walls were plastered with maps and case photos. 5 years, Carol whispered on another October anniversary. She'd be 22 now. They clung to each other, mourning not just Emily's disappearance, but the life she should have lived. College, love, a future. Jessica Chen, now a journalist, still wore Emily's bracelet and wrote articles keeping the case alive. She'd uncovered patterns in other disappearances, suggesting a wider network, but without evidence, all she had were theories. And so, Emily Sanders remained missing, alive but invisible, trapped in a false life she couldn't escape. In March 2017, Sarah Crawford gave birth to her first child, a daughter she named Emma. The name echoed her buried identity, Emily Sanders, though no one knew. David watched from the hallway, satisfied. He'd controlled Sarah for 6 years, shaping her into someone who no longer belonged to herself. Michael was a loving husband and father, working hard and unaware their family was built on kidnapping and lies. Sarah adored her daughter, but feared what motherhood meant. It tied her even more tightly to the false life David had forced on her. Linda treated Emma like her own grandchild, and Tyler became a doting cousin. The illusion of family was complete, which was exactly what David wanted. Sometimes when the house was quiet, Sarah searched her real name online. Photos of her teenage self, Emily Sanders, missing since 2011, stared back. The age progression images looked hauntingly close to her current face. Seeing her parents in news photos, older, exhausted, still searching, filled her with guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the screen. The years blurred together. Emma grew. Sarah had a son, Lucas, in 2020, just as the pandemic began. Isolation felt almost normal to her, though it deepened the cage she already lived in. Then, in August 2020, David suffered a fatal heart attack. He died instantly, leaving behind confusion, false identities, and unfinished control. At the funeral, Sarah felt nothing. No relief, no grief, only emptiness. The man who stole her life was gone, but the lies remained. Robert approached her afterward. David kept records, everything. "If you talk, others will come for you," he warned. "Live your life, Sarah." It's what he would have wanted. Even in death, David's shadow lingered. Months later, Sarah battled postpartum depression and exhaustion. Michael worked extra hours to help Linda, who mourned her husband blindly. But Lucas's health began to decline, breathing problems that doctors couldn't explain. Each visit meant repeating the same lies on medical forms. By spring 2021, as her baby fought for air in the pediatric ward, Sarah realized her false identity was now costing more than her freedom. It was threatening her child's life. "We need the full medical history for both parents," the nurse said. Sarah froze. She didn't know the Merchant's background, because she wasn't one of them. Her real name was Emily Sanders, missing from Huntsville, Alabama since 2011. "I'm adopted," she lied. But as Lucas's condition worsened, the truth weighed heavier. Watching her son struggle in the ICU, Sarah realized her lies might now cost him his life. Late that night, she stood by the hospital window looking out at Jackson. For nearly 10 years, she had lived under a stolen name, cut off from her past, Trembling, she searched online for Emily Sanders, missing since 2011. Her teenage face appeared in dozens of articles. One phone call could end the lie, but it could also destroy the fragile life she'd built. She put the phone away, whispering to her sleeping son, "Soon." By May 2021, Lucas's doctors ordered advanced genetic testing that required both parents' DNA. Sitting beside Michael, who knew nothing, Sarah felt the walls close in. "Mrs. Crawford," said Dr. Hammond, "we need accurate information. Your son's life may depend on it." Sarah's hands shook. She looked at Michael, then made her choice. "I need to speak with you privately," she told the doctor. When he left, she confessed, "My name isn't Sarah Crawford, it's Emily Sanders. I was kidnapped in Huntsville in 2011. Dr. Hammond stared, speechless. Emily told her story: abduction, captivity, false identity, and the life she'd built under coercion. "We'll run the genetic test immediately," the doctor said, "but I must contact law enforcement." Emily nodded. "Please, just make sure my son gets the care he needs first." Hours later, the University of Mississippi Medical Center became the center of a national story. Police secured the pediatric wing while detectives and FBI agents arrived. In Huntsville, Detective Morrison made the call that would change everything. "Mrs. Sanders, we believe we found your daughter." Carol dropped the phone, sobbing. Richard took it, his voice trembling. "Is Emily alive?" "We believe so," Morrison said. "We need you in Jackson for confirmation." 15 minutes later, they were on the road with an FBI escort, driving through tears and disbelief. After 10 years of searching, they were about to learn if the impossible was true. At the hospital, Emily sat with FBI agent Rebecca Torres and Detective Morrison, who'd driven from Huntsville as soon as news broke. Michael was being questioned elsewhere, his world collapsing as he learned his wife's real identity. "Walk me through October 14, 2011, Morrison said. Emily closed her eyes. "It was raining. I left Lee High School, skipped the game with Jessica Chen, and waited for the bus on University Drive. That's when the dark sedan stopped." She described David Merchant in detail, his voice, the route he took, the unsettling knowledge he had about her family. "We believe Merchant was part of a trafficking network," Morrison explained. "At least 11 other similar cases. Emily gave them everything: names, addresses, forged IDs, every memory she'd carried for 10 years. Torres nodded. This could break open multiple cases. Then came the hardest question. "What about my children?" Torres hesitated. "Legally, they were born to Sarah Crawford, your false identity. We'll need to fix documentation and custody since Michael is their biological father." "He didn't know," Emily said. "He's a victim too." A knock at the door interrupted them. "The Sanders are here," a nurse said. Emily froze. Her parents, after 10 years. "Are you ready to see them?" Morrison asked. She looked at her hands, aged by survival, and whispered, "Yes." The reunion took place in a private room with counselors present. For a long moment, no one moved. "Emmy?" Carol whispered, her voice breaking. Emily rushed into her arms, sobbing. Richard joined them, the three clinging together after a decade of loss. "I'm sorry," Emily cried. "I tried to leave clues." "No, baby," Carol said. "You survived. That's all that matters." "We never stopped looking," Richard added. Between tears, Emily explained about Michael, Emma, and Lucas, the family she'd built in captivity. Carol's expression shifted from pain to resolve. "I want to meet my grandchildren," she said. "We'll face whatever comes together." Emily hesitated. "Emma thinks I'm Sarah. How do I tell her?" "With love and time," Richard said. "We'll help her understand." Agent Torres returned, apologetic. "We have to continue the interview, and the media is outside. The story's gone national." The reunion had lasted less than an hour before reality intruded, but it was enough to remind Emily who she truly was. 2 days later, stabilized and dressed in her own clothes again, Emily faced the press beside her parents. She thanked the FBI and medical teams, revealing that her son's illness, once misdiagnosed, was now treatable thanks to her true medical history. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of a survivor reclaiming her life and identity. "My name is Emily Sanders," she began, her voice trembling but steady. 10 years ago, I was kidnapped from a bus stop in Huntsville, Alabama. I've lived under a false identity ever since." She briefly thanked law enforcement, doctors, and her parents, asking for privacy as her family began to heal. Agent Torres confirmed that the case had uncovered a multi-state kidnapping network with several arrests already made. Files seized from David's house documented crimes spanning 15 years. finally exposing the group that had operated in secret for so long. Michael Crawford sat in his lawyer's office, stunned. His wife, Sarah Merchant, was actually Emily Sanders, a missing person. Their marriage might not even be legal. "Am I going to be charged?" he asked. "No," his attorney assured him. "You're considered a victim." When Michael met Emily at the hospital, she wept. "I'm sorry," she said. "You deserve the truth. Were any of your feelings real?" he asked. "I love you and the kids," Emily replied, sobbing. "That was always real." "I don't know how we fix this," he said softly. "Neither do I," she whispered. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. 3 months later, Emily stood in her preserved childhood room in Huntsville. Her parents had kept it untouched for 10 years. Emma played on the floor. Lucas crawled nearby. Michael was downstairs talking to her father about work. Life was slowly finding rhythm again. Therapy had helped Emily rebuild her identity and testify against her captors, leading to 17 arrests. Her reunion with friends was bittersweet, too many years lost. But she was alive. "Why are you crying, Mommy?" Emma asked. "Because we're together," Emily said, holding back tears. Her mother joined her with old photo albums. "We talked about you at every holiday," Carol said. "We always saved a place for you." Emily leaned against her, watching her children and realizing she now belonged to two worlds, the past she'd lost and the life she'd built in captivity. Healing would take years, but she was home. And for now, that was enough. 2 years later, Emily stood before reporters as spokesperson for the Never Stop Searching Foundation. "Recovery isn't a moment. It's a process," she said. "After 10 years in captivity, I'm still healing, but I survived. And I want every family of a missing person to keep fighting. Miracles do happen." Her parents watched proudly, her husband and children in the front row. The case had led to new laws, the rescue of 12 other victims, and the complete dismantling of David Merchant's network. Emily Sanders had been missing 3,753 days. She was found with 2 children, a new name, and scars that would last a lifetime. But she was alive, and that was the miracle that mattered most.